The room went silent as I stood up at the family dinner table, my hands trembling around the glass in front of me. My daughter-in-law had just called me the plague ruining their lives, in front of everyone. I looked around the room, feeling every eye on me, but this time I wasn't going to back down. I raised my glass and said what everyone was thinking. I'm Emma, and I've spent my life putting family first, but what happens when the people you love treat you like you don't matter? Have you ever been made to feel invisible by your own family? Drop a comment and let me know your story. I'm sure many of us can relate. The music faded as I noticed my seat at the far end of the table. The quiet whispers that followed told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't like I expected to be the center of attention, but I certainly hadn't imagined being so far removed from the center of it all. The whole evening was supposed to be a celebration, but all I could feel was the cold distance between me and the rest of the family. The chatter around the table grew louder, but somehow it felt muted to me, like I was listening through a thick fog. Michael and Susan were talking in low voices, their words barely audible over the clink of glasses and the soft hum of background music. I could see them glancing at me now and then, but it was the kind of glance you give a stranger in the street. Polite, but distant. I wasn't one of them anymore. I was just an outsider at my own son's birthday dinner. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair, adjusting the napkin on my lap, trying to force myself to relax. The table was full of people, friends of Michael and Susan, neighbors, acquaintances, but there was no space for me at the heart of it. No one bothered to ask me to sit closer, to join the conversation. I was just a bystander in a family that didn't quite feel like mine anymore. As I sat there, I felt an odd sense of loneliness creeping up, colder than the evening breeze outside. How had I let it get to this point? Michael, my son, the boy I had raised, had no idea how it felt to be ignored in his own home, in his own family. "Mom, where should I put these?" Michael's voice broke through my thoughts. His bright smile, so familiar, was a comfort and a reminder all at once. He was holding bags of ice, looking for a place to stash them in the cooler. "In the cooler, sweetheart," I replied, smoothing my blouse and forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. He nodded and moved toward the cooler. It seemed like everything Michael did had the same effect on me these days. There, but not really there. His movements were fluid, automatic. But as I watched him walk across the room, I couldn't help but notice how much older he seemed. Not just physically, but in the way he carried himself, in the way he never really seemed to notice anything I needed anymore. Susan was standing with her back to me, her arms folded, her usual tight smile on her face. I had long since stopped expecting a warm welcome from her. The mother-daughter bond I had hoped for never materialized. And now, after all these years, I had come to accept it. Still, tonight it stung more than usual. I turned to head back into the kitchen to check on the salad, but then I heard it, her voice sharp and cutting. "It's always the same thing with her," Susan said. Her words sliced through the air, clear as day, though I wasn't supposed to hear them. These forced family gatherings, like we're obligated to show up and pretend we're one big happy family. The clink of a glass being set down snapped my attention back. I froze, my hand still on the screen door. I knew what was coming next. The conversation continued, louder this time. "She's been the plague that ruined our lives," Susan's voice continued, thick with disdain. "Always hovering, always having an opinion about everything we do, always holding that money over our heads." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. The words echoed in my mind, each one a sharp jab. The mortgage payments, the thousands I'd spent on their house, the money I'd borrowed, all for them. They never seemed to remember that, but I did. I always remembered. The blood drained from my face and my fingers went numb. Slowly, I turned. Michael saw me first, his face draining of color. Susan's eyes widened, and she tried to recover quickly, but there was no hiding the guilt in her face. "Emma," she started, her voice faltering, but the words trailed off. She had no idea how to fix what had just been said. The patio fell silent. My brother-in-law, Dave, stared into his beer, unwilling to meet anyone's gaze. Janet, his wife, adjusted her sunglasses as if the sunlight had suddenly gotten too bright. The children played with the sprinkler, oblivious to the tension in the air. They were too young to understand the weight of what had just been said. "The plague that ruined your lives?" I repeated, my voice surprising me with how steady it was. But my hands were trembling. "That's what I am to you?" Michael stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Mom, she didn't mean that. It's just—" "I heard exactly what she meant," I interrupted, cutting him off. My gaze fixed firmly on Susan. "The plague that ruined your lives has been paying the mortgage on your house for 8 years. But don't worry," I added, my voice colder now. "I won't be ruining your lives much longer." I set the salad bowl down on the counter with a sharp thud, feeling my hands shake as I walked through the house. I grabbed my purse from the hallway table and walked out the front door. My breath came in quick gasps, each step feeling heavier than the last. I didn't cry until I was safely in the car, the door locked behind me. Once inside, I broke down. The sobs came in great waves, choking me as I pressed my face into the steering wheel. 30 minutes passed, and I waited, expecting Michael to come running after me to apologize, to say something, anything that might make this feel like a mistake. But no one came. The sound of the party continued on without me, as if I had never been there. I sat there in the car, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't go back in. I couldn't pretend it didn't matter anymore. At home, I moved through the empty rooms of the house like a ghost. The walls, the photos, the furniture, everything reminded me of how much I had given up. And for what? A family that barely noticed, a son who had long since stopped seeing me as anything more than an ATM. As I sank down onto the edge of my bed, staring at Jim's wedding photo on my nightstand, I whispered into the silence, "What would you do?" The silence stretched around me, broken only by the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. For years, I had given everything to this family. My youth, my savings, my dreams of traveling after retirement, all sacrificed because I believed family came first. And now, sitting alone in my bedroom, I finally allowed myself to wonder if I had been wrong all along. It wasn't until later, after the guests had left, that I stumbled upon the mortgage statement. I hadn't meant to go through it. I should have been tidying up the kitchen, finishing up the last few dishes. But instead, I found myself drawn to the small pile of papers on the kitchen counter. A stray envelope, its corner peeking from under a stack of bills, caught my eye. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it as I flipped it over, my fingers moving automatically. It was from the bank, the mortgage company. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected to find anything of consequence. After all, everything was fine, right? I'd been making the payments all these years, so what was the problem? But the moment I opened it, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. The numbers printed on the page stared back at me cold and unyielding. The amounts, the payments, the balance due. I had seen these numbers before, but something was different now. I sat down heavily in the chair by the kitchen table, the paper trembling in my hands. My mind began to piece it all together. I had always assumed that Michael and Susan were handling things, that we were all just doing the best we could. But as I scanned the statement again, I saw it clearly. I had been paying the mortgage for years, 8 years to be exact. I had been paying the bills, making sure the house stayed afloat, and they never once acknowledged it. Never once said thank you. The weight of the document in my hands felt like a burden I'd been carrying for years without knowing. It was like all those years of sacrifice, of late-night payments, of writing checks to keep the house running, had never even mattered to them. It wasn't just the mortgage. It was the other things too. The renovations, the cars, the emergency loans for Susan's business, the private school tuition for the kids. I had been the silent benefactor, the one who held everything together while they smiled and lived their lives. And I had never been asked, never been given a choice. The tears started to gather in the corners of my eyes. I wiped them away, frustrated with myself. How had I let it go on like this? How had I allowed them to take so much from me without ever giving anything back? It felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. I had spent years in this role, always the one who gave, who fixed, who made sure everything was okay. But no one ever saw it. No one ever noticed. I had given up my retirement savings, my future, my peace of mind for their comfort, and what did I have in return? Nothing. I stared at the document, the stark reality of the numbers, the total amount I had paid, the sum that was now an overwhelming burden. Over $300,000, and there it was, in black and white, my name at the bottom of the page. I was the one responsible. I was the one who had paid for everything, who had kept them afloat, and no one had ever bothered to thank me. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor as I paced the kitchen. "I've given everything to this family," I muttered, my voice a hoarse whisper. "And they haven't even noticed." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the papers across the room and make them see. But the truth was, they wouldn't. They would never understand. They had taken it all for granted, and now here I was, sitting in the silence of my own house, surrounded by all the things I had given them, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been invisible all these years. The kitchen felt colder, the air thick with the weight of my thoughts. I looked at the clock on the wall, the ticking of the second hand loud in the quiet of the room. It felt like time itself was mocking me. It had been so easy for them to rely on me, to use me as their safety net, but now that safety net was gone. What would they do when I was no longer here to fix their problems? What would happen when they no longer had me to bail them out? My phone buzzed on the counter, pulling me from my thoughts. I looked at the screen. Michael's name flashed in bold letters. I stared at it for a moment, the desire to pick it up and answer battling with the voice inside my head telling me to let it go. I picked it up. "Mom, we need your help." Michael's voice crackled on the other end, full of urgency. "Susan's been stressing about the bills, and we're really struggling here. You know how it is." I felt the words rise in my throat, but I held them back. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking as I listened to him. The same thing, the same story over and over again. He was asking for more. He didn't even know what I had already given. How much more could I give before I broke? I thought to myself, but I didn't say it aloud. I couldn't. "I need time to think," I said instead, my voice colder than I had intended. Michael's response was immediate, desperate. "Mom, we're really in a bind here. I don't know what we're going to do if we don't get this money by Friday." I felt a surge of anger, but I swallowed it down. I didn't answer. I didn't have the words, not anymore. Instead, I ended the call. For a moment, I stood there, the phone still in my hand, my fingers numb. I could feel my chest tightening, my breath coming in short gasps. I had done enough. I had given enough. And yet, they still wanted more. I looked back at the mortgage statement on the table, the number $300,000 staring up at me. I had no idea what to do next. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep giving without getting anything in return. But how could I stop? When Michael called again, I knew I couldn't say yes. Not this time. The phone sat heavy in my hand, its screen glowing with his name, but I didn't reach for it. I wasn't going to answer. I couldn't. Not after everything. I had spent my entire life saying yes, doing everything in my power to keep this family afloat, but I couldn't do it anymore. I placed the phone back down on the counter, the vibrating buzz of the call fading into the stillness of the house. My hands were trembling, but my resolve was firmer than ever. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me, not this time. Not after everything I had uncovered, after seeing the mortgage statement and realizing just how much I had been carrying this entire time. It had to stop now. The truth had been looming over me for so long, but I had been too afraid to face it. But now, there was no turning back. I could feel the walls closing in as I realized that the truth would come out soon. It was inevitable. Michael and Susan would know, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. I walked to the living room, pacing the floor. The house felt too quiet, too empty, but this was it. This was the moment I had been avoiding for years. No more lies, no more pretending I didn't see what was happening. They had taken so much from me, and I had let them. I had sacrificed my retirement, my future, my peace of mind, all for them. And now, I was finally going to tell them the truth. I wasn't sure what would happen next. Would they listen? Would they even care? Or would they continue to take and take, expecting me to fix everything for them? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I had to be heard. The clock on the wall ticked louder now, each second stretching longer than the last. I felt my stomach tighten as I picked up the phone again, glancing at Michael's missed call. For a moment, I considered calling him back, trying to explain, but I knew it wouldn't matter. I needed to do this face to face. I needed to confront them. I grabbed my purse from the hallway table and headed out the door. The air outside was cool, a slight breeze rustling the leaves in the trees. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I arrived at Michael and Susan's house, but I knew this wasn't going to be easy. As I drove, the miles between my house and theirs felt longer than they ever had before. The house, the one I had helped buy, the one I had paid for, loomed in front of me as I parked in their driveway. It looked the same as it always had, pristine, well-kept, and untouched by the financial strain that had been eating away at me for years. Susan's new SUV was parked out front, and I felt a pang of resentment as I stepped out of the car. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. A few moments later, Michael opened it, looking surprised to see me standing there. His eyes flickered to my face, and I could see the anxiety creeping in. "Mom," he said, stepping aside to let me in, "I didn't expect you to come by." "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady but firm. Michael's face tightened, and he glanced over his shoulder at Susan, who was sitting on the couch, her eyes focused on her phone. I could see the tension between them, the unspoken words, and I could feel it too, the weight of all the things left unsaid, the truth that had been hiding behind every conversation, every thanks that never came. I took a deep breath, standing in their living room, the place that had always seemed so welcoming, but now felt so foreign to me. "I'm not your ATM, Michael. I've given enough, and it's time you knew the truth." His face went pale as the words sank in. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. "You've been using me," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "For years. I've been paying the mortgage on your house, the renovations, the emergency expenses. Over $300,000, and you've never once stopped to think about what it's cost me." Michael shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Susan for reassurance, but Susan didn't speak. She was still glued to her phone, as if none of this mattered to her. I could feel the anger rising in me, but I held it back, focusing on Michael. "You've asked me for money so many times, and each time I gave. I gave because you're my son, because I thought I was helping. But I'm not helping. I'm enabling you. You're using me, Michael, and I won't stand for it anymore." The silence in the room was suffocating. Susan didn't even look up from her phone, and Michael, standing in front of me, was at a loss for words. I saw him swallow hard, the weight of my words hitting him. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he didn't say anything. I waited for him to say something, anything, to acknowledge what I had just said, but he didn't. Instead, he shifted on his feet, the words stuck in his throat. It was clear that he wasn't sure how to react. I wasn't going to make it easy for him anymore. "You think I don't see how you've been living? The car, the house, the pool you're planning to put in. You're drowning in debt, and you want me to keep saving you. But I can't do that anymore. I won't." Michael took a step back, his face flushing with frustration, but he said nothing. It was Susan who finally looked up, her expression hard and defensive. "What do you expect us to do, Emma?" she snapped. "We're struggling. You know how much we've sacrificed." "You haven't sacrificed anything," I shot back. "I'm the one who's been sacrificing. All these years, I've been the one paying for everything while you both act like nothing's wrong. I'm done." I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving them standing there in stunned silence. The door slammed behind me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had finally taken control of my own life. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if they would ever understand, but I had said my piece, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The room fell silent when I stood up. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, and for a moment, I almost hesitated. The weight of the room's attention was overwhelming, but something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. I wasn't going to allow myself to be ignored, to be invisible, any longer. It was a family gathering, Michael's birthday celebration full of laughter and clinking glasses, the hum of conversation flowing around the table. I had been sitting at the far end, barely noticed, when everything in me told me it was time to speak up. I had been invisible for too long, but not anymore. I glanced at Michael, who sat with Susan by his side. Both of them were looking at me now, confused, but I didn't care. I could see their faces, their eyes wide with surprise, and yet there was something else in those expressions too. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was fear, but it didn't matter. I took a deep breath, the air suddenly thick around me, and then I began to speak. For years, I've sat at this table, watching you all, helping in every way I could, and for years you've treated me like I was invisible. But not anymore. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The entire room, once buzzing with the sound of chatter and laughter, now stood still, as if every person was holding their breath, waiting for me to say more. I've given everything for this family. I've paid the mortgage on this house for 8 years. I've loaned you money when you needed it. I've helped with the kids, the house renovations, and all the emergencies. And what have I gotten in return? Nothing but silence. Nothing but empty gratitude. The words hit the air like thunder, shaking the quiet. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and Susan, sitting beside him, avoided my gaze. But it was clear now. This was no longer just about me sitting quietly and taking it. I had given everything, and they had taken it all for granted. "You don't see it, do you?" I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You've never once stopped to think about what I've done for you. You've never thanked me. You've never acknowledged the sacrifices I've made. I've watched as you lived your lives, bought new cars, renovated your house, all while I drained my savings just to keep you afloat. And all the while, you never asked me if I wanted to be a part of this. You never asked if I could afford to keep giving." Michael opened his mouth, but no words came out. Susan looked at me with an almost blank expression, her lips tight, but I wasn't going to stop. I had already come too far to turn back now. "I'm not your ATM," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a knife. "I've given all I can, and I've had enough. You've used me, Michael. You've used me, Susan, and I'm done." The room was dead silent, every person in that room aware of the weight of my words. Michael, who had always been my son, the boy I raised, sat there looking at me with a mixture of shock and guilt, but there was no apology in his eyes, just a quiet plea for understanding. Susan's eyes flickered to Michael, then back to me. Her face was a mask of anger and confusion, but I didn't care about her anger anymore. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. "I never asked for anything in return," I said, my voice softer now but still firm. "But I did deserve something. I deserved respect. I deserved acknowledgement for all I've done. And now, I'm telling you, I won't do it anymore. I'm not your safety net, and I won't be treated like one." I felt the eyes of the room on me, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. "I've been invisible all these years," I said, my words lingering in the air, heavy with the truth, but not anymore. There was a long pause, and then Michael stood up. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. His face was pale, his hands shaking, but his voice was lost. He looked to Susan for support, but she didn't speak either. She was still sitting there, her lips pressed tightly together. The silence stretched on, and in that moment, I realized that I had said everything I needed to say. There was nothing more to be said. I turned to leave, my heart pounding in my chest, but before I could take a step, Michael spoke. His voice was small, almost a whisper. "Mom, I didn't mean—" I cut him off before he could finish. "You never meant it, Michael. You never meant it when you said thank you. You never meant it when you promised you'd pay me back. You never meant it when you promised anything. You just wanted me to keep giving." I turned and walked out of the room, feeling the weight of every step. The door closed behind me with a soft thud, and I felt like I could finally breathe again. The knot that had been tightening in my chest for years had loosened. The weight of the silence, the burden of everything I had carried alone, was finally gone. But even as I walked away, I wondered, would they ever respect me again? Would they ever see me as more than just a source of money, a safety net? Or would I forever be the invisible one? The truth was heavier than I thought, and as I uncovered more, I realized how deep the lies went. It started with one document, a single mortgage statement that had set everything in motion, unraveling years of deception. But as I sat in my kitchen, staring at the papers spread out in front of me, I began to see that the lies were not just about money. They were about everything. About the trust I had placed in my family, in my son, and in the woman he had chosen to marry. All these years, I thought I was helping, but now I see I've been enabling their lies. The weight of this realization pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I thought I had done everything out of love, out of a sense of duty as a mother. I thought I was the one holding everything together, making sure that no one fell. But I had been blind, and in my blindness, I had been a fool. Michael and Susan had been lying to me for years, using me, taking advantage of my kindness without ever once considering what it was costing me. I had always known that Michael and Susan weren't exactly financially responsible, but I never imagined the extent to which they had hidden things from me. It wasn't just the mortgage, it was more, much more. The other day, while going through some old files, I found more documents, credit card statements, loan agreements, invoices for things I knew they hadn't paid for themselves. And then there was a new revelation. A large sum of money they had borrowed from a friend, one I had never heard of. I stared at the figure, unable to comprehend how they had kept all of this from me. I couldn't believe it. They weren't just hiding money. They'd been hiding everything from me. Every decision, every loan, every promise made and broken had been kept in the dark. I had been paying their debts without knowing that more were being created in secret. I had been so focused on helping them that I hadn't asked the right questions. The betrayal hit me harder than I expected. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted them for so long, only to find out that they had been manipulating me every step of the way? I sat there for a long time, the papers spread out in front of me like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, the minutes stretching into eternity. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. I stared at the screen. Michael's name. I couldn't bring myself to answer it. Not now. Not after everything. I felt a strange sense of relief as I let the call go to voicemail. Instead, I grabbed my coat and headed out the door. I needed answers. I needed someone who could help me make sense of what was happening. I made my way to the small office of the financial advisor I had been referred to, someone who could help me understand what was really going on with my finances. As I sat across from her, the weight of the situation felt heavier than ever. She slid a stack of documents across the table toward me. "These are the loans your son and daughter-in-law have taken out in your name," she said, her voice calm but serious. "It's clear that they've been hiding these from you. They've leveraged your credit without your knowledge, and now they're deep in debt." I felt the blood drain from my face as I looked at the numbers. My hands shook as I turned the pages, each one revealing more about the extent of their financial mismanagement. I couldn't help but wonder, did they think I wouldn't notice? Did they think I wouldn't find out? How long had this been going on behind my back? The advisor continued explaining the situation, but I barely heard her. My thoughts were a whirlwind of anger, frustration, and hurt. All this time, I had believed that I was helping my family, but in reality, I had been enabling their lies, their irresponsibility, and their selfishness. I left the office with the weight of the truth on my shoulders, my mind reeling from everything I had just learned. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep paying for their mistakes, covering up their lies. I had to take control of my own life again. I couldn't let them use me any longer. As I drove home, I realized something else. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, about the way they had treated me, the way they had taken advantage of my love and generosity. I wasn't just angry about the money. I was angry that they had betrayed me. And as I pulled into my driveway, I made a decision. I wasn't going to help them anymore. I wasn't going to be their safety net. I had spent too many years supporting them while they ignored me, while they hid the truth from me. I was done. I walked away from my old life, leaving behind the family I once knew, the house, the memories, the burdens I had carried for so long. All of it was behind me now. I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders as I drove away, my heart pounding with both fear and exhilaration. I had done it. I had finally let go. I had spent so many years holding on to the belief that family was everything, that love was enough to keep us together. But what I had learned over the past months was that love, when it's one-sided, becomes a trap. It becomes a chain that ties you down, a chain that doesn't let you breathe, doesn't let you live for yourself. I had spent my entire life sacrificing for them, for Michael, for Susan, and for a family that never appreciated me the way I deserved. But now, I was free. The house was empty, but it was finally mine. There were no more cries for help, no more requests for money, no more pretending that everything was okay. The walls that had once held the weight of my sacrifices now stood silent, empty, free of the invisible chains I had allowed to bind me for so long. The house was gone. My old life was gone. And in their place, a new chapter had begun. I had sold the house, the one I had called home for over 30 years. It had been hard to let go, to see it handed over to someone else. But I knew it was the right thing to do. I had spent years holding on to the past, believing that if I just held on a little longer, everything would get better. But I had come to realize that letting go was the only way forward. The small coastal cottage I now called home was nothing like my old house. It was simple, quiet, and peaceful. The air smelled of salt water, the ocean breeze drifting in through the open windows. It was a far cry from the chaos of my old life, from the constant noise of my family's demands. Here, in this small corner of the world, I could finally breathe. I could finally hear my own thoughts without the constant hum of guilt, obligation, and resentment drowning them out. I had left the chaos behind, but the journey was far from over. I had started to make new friends. People who didn't know me as Michael's mother or Susan's mother-in-law. They saw me as Emma, just Emma. And that felt good. I had joined a book club, taken up painting again, and even started volunteering at the local community center. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a purpose that wasn't tied to someone else's needs. But even as I found my footing in this new life, I couldn't ignore the fact that Michael and Susan were still there, in the background of my thoughts, in the lingering sense of unfinished business that haunted me. I had told myself I was done with them, that I was done being their ATM, their caretaker, their emotional support. But every so often, a message from Michael would pop up on my phone, a reminder that I wasn't entirely free from them yet. I had told him I was done. I had said I wouldn't help anymore, that I couldn't keep sacrificing for them. But now, I found myself wondering, had I really let go? Had I truly freed myself from their grip? Or was I just fooling myself into thinking I was free? The phone rang one evening as I was sitting in my new living room, the soft light of the sunset streaming through the windows. I looked at the screen. It was Michael. I stared at his name for a moment, my finger hovering over the button. I had already made my decision, hadn't I? I had already walked away. I didn't owe him anything. I didn't owe anyone anything. I let the phone ring until it went to voicemail. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the ocean. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore brought me a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally living for myself. I was no longer their savior. I was saving myself now. I had built a new life, and I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all Michael, drag me back into the mess I had left behind. The truth was, I had been the one holding them up for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to stand on my own 2 feet. But now I was learning. I was learning to live for myself, to do what made me happy, to find peace in my own company. And yet, even as I stood there, I couldn't shake the question that lingered in the back of my mind. Would they ever respect me again? Would they ever understand what I had done for them? Or would they continue to see me as just a tool, a source of money and support? I didn't know. But for the first time, I realized that it didn't matter. I had made my choice. I had chosen myself. I was finally free. As laughter filled our family table, I felt truly seen after standing up for myself. I had spent too many years feeling invisible, silenced by the weight of unacknowledged sacrifices. But I had learned that no one has the right to make you invisible. Speaking your truth, no matter how painful, can rebuild bonds, even if some cracks remain. Every step toward honesty is a victory, a step toward reclaiming your worth. If you've ever felt overlooked by family, share your story. Let's remind each other we matter. We all deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to stand tall in our own lives.